I remember the yellow pages.
Yeah, I remember them too.
We got them delivered to our house here.
In Canada?
Yeah, they're not even a memory in Canada. They're an actual thing still.
In 2022?
Yes.
That's weird.
Even we thought it was weird. Both of us old people. We recycled it.
Yeah, is that how you found your hairdresser? The yellow pages? No, I'm not. I'm just saying that
Sarah,
was not a read.
You just can't get enough today, can you?
I'm so sorry. That was not a read.
Jesus
I was just
Christ.
making a joke. I'm so sorry.
I somehow feel that's going to get cut.
Oh yeah. All these edits put me in a very good light. Don't you worry. Hello, welcome to the Bookcast Club, a podcast for book lovers. Today you have me, Sarah, coming to you from the Netherlands, and I'm joined by two wonderful previous guests from the pod. Kieran from KD Books, who is joining us from Wales, and Christine from Storycraft, who I think was living in the Netherlands last time I talked to her, but has actually moved to Canada since then. As you do, I suppose. How are you, Kieran? I guess you can start if you like.
I'm dandy. Always a bit dandy. I feel as though, I've had 2 paracetamol and I'm ready to up and at them.
Is there something wrong with you, or is that just how you get going?
That's the way I spice up my Friday nights these evenings, to be honest. So,
Keeping it crazy.
I had a cold and flu tablet today, actually. So.
I mean, the way you're going, I feel like I should tell you I'm on heart medication or something.
Oh, she's a bit upset, Kieran, because I called her old girl.
You call me old, I can't believe it.
Well, I said old girl in an affectionate way. But...
How old are you?
We're going there, aren't we? I'm 45.
Ooh, no, it's fine. It's fine.
He's old. So we're here to talk about the International Booker today, which is like kind of your brand, Kieran, isn't it?
Yeah, I talk about it a little bit on my channel.
Yeah,
it's not
I think you're
a
more
big...
booker than the booker.
You
You certainly talk about it more than they do, that's for sure. There's certainly more fanfare from you than there is from them.
I do love it. It's just I think it's like the epitome of like subjectivity. It's like, what is the best book of the English language in this year? Like, everyone disagrees mostly, and then some people agree. And it's that volatile nature of people arguing about things that truly it's not that important. And I love it.
I think, Kieran, you really feed off the sort of perpetual disgruntlement of everyone who's involved with the booker. You really...
Yeah.
Also, with yourself, you sort of like don't get unhappy about who won, and you sort of seem to get jazzed from that.
Well, it's like today I found out that the Dylan Thomas Prize, the Welsh Prize represent, has awarded the winner being Patricia Lockwood's, and no one is talking about this. And I feel as though it's a cloud that has shrouded my Welsh identity, that somehow my being is now attached to that monstrosity.
I thought that book was dreadful. Glad think we're not talking about that phrase. I didn't know she was Welsh. Do you have to be Welsh to...
Oh no, you have to be under 40. Christine, sorry, you couldn't apply for it, but it's fine, don't worry about it.
I don't think you're pretentious enough, though, to be honest. Not if Lockwood's the standard that we're going for. So, the long list, you guys. Let's talk about the International Booker long list for a minute, I guess. So, you've read the shortlist, Kieran, right?
Read the long list.
You've read oh my god, you've read it all. I've read most of the shortlist. Christine, you've read...
Like nothing. I don't count like you guys read.
Oh. Yeah. Christine, I'll just put this out early doors to let me down. That's fine.
Seriously.
She texted me today like, oh, by the way, I didn't read like half the shit that I said I would. And I was like,
No.
Okay, so the long list came out like 2 months ago, and then the shortlist came out like a month ago or so. Kieran, what did you think about the long list to shortlist transition? Was there anything you were like disappointed about not seeing? How did you feel about the shortlist?
Oh, I was really sad that the Book of Mother didn't make it.
Yeah, me too.
I was really sad about that. But apart from that, quite happy with the shortlist.
Okay. I would have liked to see Sang-Yong Park's novel on there, which the name of which has slipped my mind completely.
Love in the Big City.
Love in the Big City.
That shows everyone how good it is that you can't even remember the title.
Oh.
Thank you.
Yes. It's mediocre at best.
I read Happy Stories mostly, and I didn't think it was great.
What did you think, Kieran? I haven't read it.
They were happy stories, mostly. I stand by my 14-second review.
Did you finish Phenotypes in the end, by the way?
Next question.
Okay, I didn't finish it either. It's so boring.
I
Oh my
did.
God.
I did.
Anyway.
I have finished it. I have.
Okay.
Next question.
Yeah, bad. I didn't think it was good. Anyway, alright. So a disappointed Book of Mother isn't on there, but aside from that, we're generally happy with the shortlist. Or we. I don't know who we is. Kieran. I'm just putting myself over on your team. Okay, hi everyone. It's Editing Sarah here. I somehow managed to mess up my own audio whilst recording this with Kieran and Christine, so I'm going to have to drop in every now and then in order to give you guys a little bit more background information. So now, as I just said, we're going to start going through the shortlist of books one by one, and we're going to start with Heaven by Mieko Kawakami, which Christine is going to introduce.
I'm not very good at these pat introductions that you guys are so skilled with. Let's see. Heaven by Mieko Kawakami is a book about two kids who are in school, and it's about what it is to live the life of the bullied and the different ways that they think about it and deal with it. And it's kind of ugly and beautiful and sad. I found it really kind of heart-wrenching having two children, one which is kind of the age of the children in this book. I found it sometimes really hard to read about how cruel children can be to each other. And there's a part of me that wants to say there's a cultural determinant in there. It wouldn't be quite like this we're in Canada now, and it would be in Japan. But of course that's wrong. Kids can be cruel all over the world, and it was really heartbreaking.
What did you think, Kieran?
I mean, it didn't make me want to pick up football or go to an outside swimming pool anytime soon.
God, no.
No. Okay, any other thoughts? Did you like it?
I did. I really enjoyed it.
I thought it was incredibly well written.
I think it was an interesting way of talking about some philosophical strands and basing it in a setting which allows vague content of the subject and allow this. The conversation between the main characters are mostly back and forth trying to understand. I think it builds up to the image and the climax at the end. I think it's an interesting way of talking about purpose and will. I'm going to leave it at that. It was a while ago since I read it, actually.
I liked it. I really liked the relationship between the two main characters, actually. I found it very believable, and I especially liked the way they kind of connected at the beginning. I found it very, a very good portrayal. I mean, not that I can really remember having friends as a child, but yeah, I just found it very realistic, the way they just kind of, got together. You know how kids kind of do that, where they're sort of, friends now, and there's no sort of development or whatever. Aside from that, I don't remember much about it now that it's been a little bit of time since I finished it, really. So I don't know if I would really read another book by the same author. It didn't sort of massively compel me, although I did really enjoy reading it.
If I wouldn't read another book by her, it would be more because I found the ending so not sad, not disappointing, but the ending left me feeling so hopeless in some ways. Just what's the point of all of this? And I wouldn't want my kids to read it. I wouldn't give this book to a person who was like, oh, I'm being bullied. I wouldn't be like, here's a way to deal with it. You could just decide that this is what you deserve in life and put up with it. Yeah. No, that bothered me about it. But not in terms of the writing, right? That's good writing if it bothers me. So I was really impressed with it. I actually thought it was a really, really, really well done book. I mean, what if you say if the main argument about bullying is it possible that this is just what my life has to be like and all I have to do is put up with it for a while? Is that a way to think about being treated like shit? Who would we advise that to?
I don't think that's what it's about, though. For me, but I think it is about where does purpose come from, and the purpose of the bullies are that they are to be bullied. That is their purpose within school, and someone has to fill that purpose. It just happens to be them, and then is that just or not? Because we know bullying happens, so therefore someone has to be the bully.
Why?
God, it makes it sound like I was absolutely heartless in school. But
I know. Why does someone have to be the bully?
Someone has to do it, he says, as he's pushing someone's head into the toilet.
Yeah.
It's not that I want to do this.
It has to be you. No, but yeah, but I think that's what Mieko is kind of like. Well, like someone has to be that role, and we know that the role is there. And is it fair? It's not. But someone has to be oppressed in some way.
There's something fundamental in me that doesn't even won't even go down that philosophical alley. It's so hopeless for me. It's so hopeless to agree that someone's gonna have to be the mean person.
Oh, I don't think she's like way. I don't think so. Being that, but
no, but I just, what does it say about anything if that's what we agree as a reality in life? Someone's going to have to be the mean person. No, it's it feels like an excuse to be the mean person. It feels like a way to accept the mean person, which is what we're seeing happen in the book, and that's why it bothers me. I just feel like it takes away some element of we get to choose the way we act. And then I think what bothers me is that the bully is saying, well, no, I don't have a choice about being bullied. Someone's got to do it. But the person who's going to put up with it seems to have a choice. So you don't get to choose to be the aggressor, but you can choose how you interact with people if you're the victim. That seems like an acceptance of something I'm not willing to accept.
I mean, she clearly does a good job.
Yes.
I think it's a really good work of literature, but I think that's the vice in it. That's the rub, that there's this. Yeah, like when the bully is confronted, it's just that's just how it is.
There's no work, right, to be a bully. You could just accept that that's your role. But if you're the person being bullied, you need to decide how you're going to deal with it. Ugh.
So, what would you have liked to see different in the book, Christine?
Nothing. I don't think I would. This isn't a fault with the book. This is a fault with a way of people seeing the world, and I think the fact that she can lay it out so clearly in the book is just a compliment. The fact that I can get so annoyed is just a compliment to the book. And I walked away definitely feeling like it was a very well written book that brought up a way of looking at things that was just really uncomfortable for me, And if anything, we need to read books like that. But good God, don't give it to children. It's empty of hope. That's what's hard for me. It's just completely empty of any kind of hope.
Yeah, it was super bleak. The whole tone of it was bleak. Just the way that the characters would, just the way that they would move around was completely bleak, and they just would sort of
super fatalistic.
Yeah, learned helplessness was the phrase that was coming to my mind as I was reading it. That when you it's that, I think it's a psychology term, when you tie a rope to an elephant, or a baby elephant, to when they're a very young age, and then they learn that they can't break away from the rope, and then when they're an adult, you can restrain them with a tiny bit of string because they've learnt that that's their fate. That was what I know, I'm sorry to have such a horrible analogy, but that's what I kept thinking of, these kind of horrible images of animals that have learnt helplessness, was kind of what I was thinking of as I was reading it. Yeah, so you would recommend it? Is this a positive review? I can't really figure out if there's a positive review.
It's really well written. I think any book that can get you actually talking about the issue that it's trying to talk about has done its job. And better than most. I mean, we're not sitting here talking about character development or plot or anything that is actually about the book.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and that, not very many books achieve that.
I really enjoyed it. I think it's a hard hitter.
Yeah, it really is. There's a couple of books on this shortlist actually that I really like. Did I enjoy it? I don't know. It was pretty good though. Enjoyment is not really, it doesn't really come into it for some of these.
If you're relying on a hit, you might as well go for the home run. And I think she does it.
Let's talk about, speaking of hard hitters, let's talk about Elena Knows, shall we?
Elena Knows, by Claudia Piñeiro, revolves around Elena, and her daughter has hung herself from the belfry of the church. And over the course of one day, dictated by her medication that eases her symptoms of her Parkinson's, she believes she's going to figure out who killed her daughter. She doesn't believe that she doesn't believe that it was suicide. She believes it is a murder. So we follow Elena throughout the day, interacting and finding out who her daughter is, realising that not everything that Elena knows is true and factual. And it was okay.
Christine, what did you think of it?
I really liked it. I've been recommending it to people. I've been describing it to people as a book written from inside of Parkinson's disease. And I've, watched a couple people suffer, and I found that aspect of it really, really fascinating. I think pitching it as a murder mystery is a waste of time because it's terrible on that front. But in terms of giving you insight into what it's like to live with a disease that changes your whole relationship with your body and the world around you, it does an incredible job.
And Kieran, what did you think?
It was okay.
What, please expand.
It was a good story, and I thought it was okay.
I haven't finished this book yet. I am finding this a really, really difficult read, actually. I agree completely that it's not a very good sell as a murder mystery. Mostly for the fact I honestly don't really care about the murder mystery element to it. I can barely remember any of the details about it, but about that aspect of the story. But the way that it's describing this woman's life with Parkinson's is like living in my head, and I can't get some of the, especially when she's talking about the way that she has to move her feet and the way that she thinks about her medication, it just is in my mind, and I can't. So I'm finding it really, really difficult to get through. Know a lot of people who have Parkinson's disease, and my grandfather died of Parkinson's disease, so it's just something that's very personal to me, and it's just sort of she's becoming my grandfather, and as I'm reading it, it's just I think of him, and I think of the things that I saw when I was a child, and his disease was getting worse. So it just is living in my head rent free, as the kids would say. In terms of the book, the plot of the book and all that kind of stuff, yeah, it's alright, but I think the writing of a character with Parkinson's is pretty exemplary, to be honest. But it's a 5 or 10 page at a time book for me, max, because I just find it really just stays in my mind for a long time.
I think the book hit me. I've underlined stuff on pages 2 and 3 where she talks about where she's going into whether Parkinson's is masculine or feminine, and I'm part of me is also curious if is it a linguistic question, from Spanish, if the disease is a masculine or feminine thing, or if it's about the being of the disease, and is it a masculine or feminine thing?
Yeah, in the original, the thing that she, the list that she mentions all are feminine verbs.
But in the translation, it of course, we don't have that in English, right? So it reads as talking about the gender of the being of Parkinson's as opposed to the word, and then it talks about the curse, which, as a woman, and all the words we use for menstruation, is it a curse, blah, blah. And I love the part when she thinks about it as fucking horror illness. And I love it because when we see a person with Parkinson's, we see an old person who looks like they're suffering from something. And we don't think about how angry that person might be and how that person might just wake up every day and say, God damn it, not another day of this shit. And I like that it gives some spunkiness to old people who we are always portrayed as losing their fieriness, and I think that I like that she's given that, and maybe it's because I'm getting old, but I don't want to think about losing my ability to be pissed off about things just because I don't think old means getting complacent, and I really appreciated that about the book, and I love that she turns out to have to still learn about herself, that her character flaw is overconfidence, it's hubris, even at her age. And if she had just been willing to listen and just been willing to pay attention, she might have seen what was going on, but she wasn't.
I think one of the most powerful images in the book for me is the way that it describes her having to look down all the time, and what she can see from her perspective as being someone who has to look down because she's got her back is haunched, and I just see her so clearly as you sit in her head so clearly, but I also see her as a person on the subway so clearly, and how other people must see her. Yeah, it's so good at giving you this very intimate perspective, I think, for someone in this position.
There's a book that I read in Dutch called Hersenschimmen by Bernlef. It's Out of Mind is the translation in English, and it's about a guy who's living with dementia, and it gave me that the books remind me of each other, just this real experience, you get to have an idea of what it might be like to be in the body of that disease. And I think those are really valuable experiences. It feels like a you should read this kind of book. I think it's if people, I had a conversation actually when we were leaving Nijmegen. There's someone in our book club who loves nonfiction and doesn't understand why you should read fiction. And I think a book like this is the reason you should read fiction. It's so you can understand what happens in lives that you can never live or haven't lived yet. But you go ahead and not like it. That's fine with me. I think it's okay.
It's just okay.
God, he's sticking to it today. Right.
Yeah, I know. So sad. We tried.
Okay, hello, editing Sarah back again. So the next novel that we're going to talk about is Tomb of Sand by Geetanjali Shree, which is translated from the Hindi by Daisy Rockwell. It's actually the first novel to be nominated for the International Booker that is translated from Hindi, and it follows an 80-year-old Indian woman who's living in northern India and decides to travel across the border to Pakistan. And she also reflects on what happened when there was the partition between India and Pakistan, which happened when she was a teenager.
So, first off, and I'm going to mention it in another book, is there are few translated works where, like, I feel as though you can't comprehend how it was translated. So, for anyone who hasn't read Tomb of Sand, if you've read it, you'll definitely notice it. It's very wordplay, lyrical. It's riffing off every meaning that a word could hold. Shree's prose and Rockwell's translation explores. And the reason for that is that Shree works with a term which it doesn't really translate into English, called dwama, which is an echo or like a reverberation or a sound. So everything's ricocheting off each other. So there's a lot of wordplay in this. So for me, just trying to fathom how the Hindi would have looked, which in and of itself is a very lyrical language, and how that has been presented in the English, where English isn't very lyrical, I would say, it is a feat to behold. So I think from the translation point of view, I think you have to applaud the actual translation.
Yeah, I had the same thought, because she said, I think it was either in the author's note or I read an interview with the translator, and she said that Shree chose not to write it in English, even though she does write it in English, because Hindi was the language that she wanted to express this story in. So I was sitting thinking, then how the hell did you translate it into English? I have absolutely no idea.
Another reason I like is that I've delved into partition literature, and I've only realised recently that the majority, if not all, is English language based. So I've never read anything that has been translated into English. And I think seeing a post-partition novel, I don't think this is a partition novel, I don't think you would call it partition, but as a post-partition novel, how Ma represents the silence of partition and the acceptance, the willingness to be liberated from the horrors of partition. I think Shree is able to explore that with a character and a setting and a scene, and through various languages. I think she's able to capture that India, with as many cultures, many histories, as many people, are all trying to understand 1947, that prominent year.
I've never been so aware as I was reading a book that it was translated, and there's a lot of it. I was sort of really, how can I put this? Struggling to understand is not quite what I want to say, but I really felt like I was missing big elements of it in English as I was reading. I don't know if you felt that way.
Can you give examples so I know what you mean?
Like, for me, a lot of I was really struggling with the through line of this novel, right? Like, I felt like the elements of this novel were really successful. Any sort of, like, if you opened it up to any sort of random section where it was focusing on any of the kind of isolated characters or whatever, I thought those parts of the novel were super successful, and I really liked the way that the characters would like think about the mother, interact with each other, these kind of like little moments I really liked. The overall story of this novel, the overall kind of picture, was something I really struggled with as I was reading it. And I was thinking, like, am I missing a lot of the things that are happening here? Is this a translation thing? Is it me? I don't know. So I liked the kind of, small parts of this novel. Overall, I didn't really enjoy it that much, to be honest. I found it, I don't know, more work than anything really. But I if you opened it up to a like random section and just read it, it's great. But it just didn't cohesively. I didn't really like it. But no, I didn't not really like it. That's not true. Cohesively, I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't on board with it.
Because I think the first and the third parts are pretty symmetrical in what happens and what occurs. It's just the situation and the landscape has changed. So I think having I would say the slog of the book is the 250 pages. Mark gets out of bed, gets lost, gets taken back to bed. That, and then understanding the final bit when they go to where the partition line is drawn, where Pakistan and India forms. I think those two, I think what Shree does to mirror and to explain that there's a similarity between those two scenes and how that feels for an individual and the family versus the nation and the countries. I really like Indian literature, so I'm pretty biased, to be honest.
Yeah, I really like the last section. That was probably my favourite, where they get that was that the last. I can't remember how they were divided up.
I think it's about 300 pages.
That last section was. I really liked that last section. That was my favourite. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't read much other stuff, so I'm certainly not in the same position as you to probably understand more of the meta side of it. Meta's not quite the right word. Yeah, the meta side of it, as you are, of course. But yeah, it's kind of a funny book.
Can I ask a question? As someone who didn't read it, what made you, in this translation, what made you feel like you were missing meaning that you don't feel that in other translations? And I'm asking because we read Discomfort of Evening a couple years ago, and I read it in Dutch, and everyone else read it in English, and everyone who read it in English was like, eh, and I read it in Dutch, and the language was gorgeous, but it was missing in the English.
Yeah, and we actually went through some of that book, like, line by line, and and found where, like, it just hadn't, where like, some of the wordplay and stuff just hadn't been captured, right? I think, of course, I was more conscious of the fact, because it's, like, written in a language that is so different from English, whereas Dutch is, like, not hugely different from English, so I guess I was more confident whilst reading Discomfort of Evening that the translation would be not good, but like that it would be more possible if you're translating it to sort of hit it bang on. Whereas if you're translating from a language that's like conceptually quite different to the language that you're reading it in, I think that would always cross my mind more, that there's going to be concepts and styles that just, aren't possible to be expressed in one language or another. And in like a language like Dutch, which is just so, in many ways is so similar, it wouldn't even have occurred to me that maybe until we actually looked at the Dutch translation, at the original Dutch, and I was like, oh, I guess Dutch can be sophisticated, So yeah, that's definitely a like language similarity, and also the fact that I'm obviously like very familiar with Dutch culture, so I sort of go into it like, I'm gonna definitely get all this. Don't you guys worry about it. I'm all over this. So I guess I'm much more aware of my own ignorance when it comes to reading a book that was originally written in Hindi compared to a book that was written in Dutch.
No, I'm curious what Kieran has to say.
In regards to the missing meaning.
Well, in the translation, the translation missing things. Not you.
I wouldn't say so on the basis that because you have this literary mode that is not, I want to phrase it right, not so much because when you're dealing with a mode of literature that is contrary to what you're used to, i.e. what Western works tend to do or what European works tend to go for, that not to assert, what I'm trying to say, Sarah, that you were asserting, like, I expect these certain things, But I definitely went into Tubasan and got a completely different book to what I was expecting. But you're dealing with a different, like, literary past, a way of writing, a way of explanation, a way of meaning that obviously you can't recreate perfectly, but you can find the harmony between the English and the Hindi. And I think Rockwell has done that because I think people are enthralled by the writing to say something's different here and I don't know what it is. And I think exploring that notion, I think it can open up different works and maybe appreciate, say, I don't like saying Indian writers because it's too big a country. There's too big a language difference. Like someone from Telugu or Tamil isn't going to do the same as someone in Hindi.
Okay, hi listeners, editing Sarah back again. Kieran unfortunately had to take off at this point to deal with a family emergency, so he didn't get to finish that thought, but he did leave me with a little voice note sharing with you sort of a summary of the rest of his thoughts about the shortlist, which I will play for you now.
Read to a Sand, Jon Fosse was really great. Books of Jakob, wow, that's a book. Whew, that was so good. Fosse to win, you keep that in. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Kieran. I have got in slight trouble from Kieran before for cutting things out. That he said not to cut out, so I thought I'd better leave that in that time. But thank you so much, Kieran, for coming on. For the rest of the episode, it's just me and Christine, so we will talk through the remaining books on the shortlist, and we will start by discussing Books of Jacob. So, Kieran's had to go, so Christine and I are going to cover the last two on our own, aren't we, Christine? So let's talk about Books of Jacob. So, most people will know Olga Tokarczuk already, because she's won the Booker International before. She won it for Flights, one of her previous novels, and then Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead was also shortlisted a couple of years ago. She's a Polish writer, and Books of Jacob is her latest novel, and it follows Jacob Frank, who was a Jew in Poland in the 18th century, so a real person rather, and he claimed to be the reincarnation of a messiah, and also he claimed to be the Jacob of the Bible, or a reincarnation of the Jacob who is in the Bible. And it's essentially kind of following his life, historical fiction. What did you think, Christine?
I have very mixed feelings about this book, in a good way, as in an interesting way, which I assume is good because you're doing a podcast. And I read it, and it is one of the hardest books I've had to try to get through in a long time. As in, I was reading War and Peace, and that was easier to just start going through pages quickly. And I got about 200 pages in, and I thought, nah, why am I going to make myself get through this? And I sat, and I write every morning, and I was writing about the book, and I started writing about it, and I started to understand what I think she's trying to do in this book, and I started to feel a little bit amazed by that, and so I've continued to work on reading it, and I probably will try to get through it, which is, I'm on page. The pages are numbered backwards, so it starts at page 960, I think, and I'm on page 559, so I'm not even halfway through, and I can really, if I get through 10 pages, I'm surprised, but it's not a page turner at all, but what it's doing is it's dancing around Jacob. We don't ever hear Jacob, except through the mouths of other people, and so she's building this whole set of stories of all these people around him, almost like this epic scene building or world building exercise where you never actually get to know what's going on with the main character. And I find that exercise really fascinating, and I find the diversity in her writing really good. It's just good. There are lots of different voices as we're going through. You hear from lots of different people. I find them to be distinct. There's poetry that's beautifully translated. In a lot of ways, I think when I think of a Booker Prize, this is the kind of book I'm looking for to come out of a Booker, meaning it's one that changes the way I think about how you could write a book. And I think it's a really interestingly bold move, and I'm sure someone else has done it before, but I don't know about it. But I think it's an interesting move to write about a book about a person, and we never hear that person, but we hear 500 other voices. So it's not, it gives you an accessibility to that one person. And what it hit me. That's what the Bible does, right? Like the Bible is about everyone, except you never hear what's going on with Jesus.
Interesting. The only book I've read that does that is The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell.
I read that book and I don't remember, but I remember liking everything he's ever written.
Yeah, it does like you're following. I think the first chapter is about the main character, and then the rest of the chapters are about people that she meets. Mm-hmm. Like they're essentially short stories, about people who know her. So you sort of follow her tangentially. Anyway, we're not talking about David Mitchell. Great book though.
It's really good.
I'm struggling with this one. I don't think I'm going to finish it. I am finding it really boring. I'll be honest. This sort of book, though, is never my thing. Like, big literary historical fiction in general, is just not something I particularly enjoy.
I don't even feel like it's historical fiction.
Well, I mean, it is, right? Wow. It's about him. It's just, they're just not books I enjoy, so I find it very unenjoyable. Like, I also didn't like Wolf Hall, which is probably the most similar.
It's nothing like Wolf Hall. That's exactly the book I was thinking about. I think it's nothing like any of those.
You don't think so?
That's why I have a hard time with historical fiction. Like, there's something that comes to mind for me with historical fiction that's like a retelling of a story that happened a long time ago in a way that maybe we can relate to it today. And I don't feel like that's what this is. This feels like a different not own category, but a different type of book. I wouldn't shelve it with historical fiction at all, because anyone who is looking to read historical fiction would pick this up and be like, feel deeply betrayed by that kind of categorization.
Because of the way that it's following, not following him. That's what you mean?
It's like, it's almost plotless, which is what makes it hard to read.
Yeah. Funny you say that. I've seen lots of people in reviews say that they think it's very similar to Wolf Hall. So I guess they're just comparing it because it's like a big book that follows a big book that follows something that happened a long time ago, I guess.
Yeah, I don't.
Comes from.
They're wildly different books, in my opinion.
Interesting. You really liked Wolf Hall, didn't you?
I loved it. I think Hilary Mantel's a great writer. What is it about Wolf Hall that I like? It feels very alive to me. Like, it's the kind of thing where you can read it and be sitting next to your fireplace and get a bit of a chill because you can imagine cold, wet walls.
Oh yeah.
And it does that, and I don't feel like Books of Jacob does that at all, and it's partly because it's very, very alienating. I don't understand the setting. I've had to keep looking up words. I've had to keep looking up things to understand what it might be like. And we don't even think of Turkey and Poland bordering each other. That's also like, what? and I think it's so far removed from anything that I'm actually very knowledgeable about that's just uncomfortable in a really interesting way. I think it's a really good book. That's why I'm decided to continue reading it. I feel like there's something to be gotten for me out of continuing to read it, even though I don't know if I like it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm glad you're getting something out of it. Is it your first one of hers that you've read? Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's made me curious about her other books.
I think it's quite different. It's much, much bigger because her previous books are very short, like sub 200 pages. So I think this one must be...
I'd like to look at them.
Stylistically, I think this must be, stylistically quite experimental for her. I think she's just.
But I'm always looking for that in books. I mean, it's been.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in. It was the late 90s when I was looking at books going, okay, so all this stuff is happening in the way that we think about literature, that people are saying literature is, people in the 90s were saying literature is dead. It's not a real viable form anymore. And that was even before we had ebooks and all these other ways to consume books. And even then I was really curious to see, how do you take the format of words on a page and turn it into something that changes the way you think about the possibilities of words on a page. And we've had graphic novels come out. We've had novels come out where people write pages upside down and backwards and in different colors. And one of the things I like about what's happening in this book is it feels it's about the format of the book as well, right? In the book, there's characters who are writing books and talking about which language should be in books and who should be able to read books. And I think it is in many ways a meditation an examination or playing with or trying all these different forms of what can a book be and what can storytelling be, because it's illustrated, which is also one of those things that is unusual these days in a book. And it raises, and somehow what those illustrations do for me in this book is raise questions of historical accuracy. Like, wait a minute, am I reading something that's real or is it fiction here? It brings up those interesting questions about what the book is doing. So I think there's a lot in it that's hard to get at the first reading, and I don't think anyone would read it twice because it's massive. But I think it's the kind of book that someone might decide to study.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Definitely, I agree with that. I'm glad you're enjoying it so much. Yeah, I still think it's boring, I'm sorry, but I'm really glad you're getting a lot out of it. It's a funny book. It seems to be, people seem to either really get a lot out of it or really not. So.
This is the kind of book I would hope for a winner. This is the kind of thing I look for when I
wouldn't be surprised if it did win. I mean, that would be her second win, which would be pretty cool, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it won. Alright, the last one is A New Name by Jon Fosse, the translator from the Norwegian. You haven't read this one?
No.
This is an interesting book. So it's the third one in a trilogy. It is about a older painter. Older, he's sort of getting into old age. And he lives in a small town in coastal Norway. And he's sort of looking back on his life, contemplating things that have happened in it. Doesn't have many friends, so the whole book is kind of like claustrophobic, like he's just doing his couple of little things that he can do. And there's also a whole other element to it where there are doppelgangers or clones in the village. So there's also a clone of him who's elsewhere doing other things, and there's a clone of his partner elsewhere doing other things. So it's a bit of a weird book in that respect. So it's kind of partly this kind of story of sort of relatively simple story about a sort of older man getting to the end of his life, and then also this sort of like weird clone element, which isn't. So yeah, third one of a trilogy. So I only read the third one. I didn't read the first two. Yeah, it's a very interesting read. It is stream of consciousness, basically. I guess there's no sentence ends, so it just sort of is like line, page break, line break. I don't know if that's really stream of consciousness, but it's quite a weird writing style. And I found it, some people really, really hate it. I think it's got a lot of really negative reviews, but I found it really compulsive, actually, in the way that it was written. And it's kind of like, it just has this feeling, I think it's because of the way that it's written with no sort of proper sentence ends. To me, it feels kind of urgent, because as you're reading it, it feels like, and then. A little bit like, quite a different book, but if you read Duck's Newburyport by Lucy Ellman, it's kind of got that like, and then, that just sort of like, yeah. But not a lot happens in it. It's an extremely slow book.
It's Norwegian.
Well, yes, Norwegian coastal town, hello. And it was the weirdest feeling reading it, because it feels sort of like, it was simultaneously slow, simultaneously urgent. It was a weird reading experience. But I really liked it, actually. Still don't really understand why the clones were in it. That's never massively explored, really. Maybe you're just supposed to figure it out by yourself. I don't know. Haven't seen any reviews that kind of thoroughly explain what the clones are there for. No one seems to really be understanding why they're there, or what it's why in general. But just really liked this. Really liked it, actually. I think I would probably read it again.
Really?
Reminded me a little bit of maybe not. I probably lied then. I probably wouldn't. But it's you know, I enjoyed it.
So dishonest.
I enjoyed it. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
Have you read The Sea by R.S. Murdoch?
No.
Okay, well then that comparison won't work for you. Never mind then.
No, but I read Hunger by Knut Hamsun, which is another Norwegian book, and it has this, and so for me, when I think of Norwegian books, it would be like slow and yet compelling.
Yeah. I
think they write like they hike. They hike fast, but you know, when you go out walking in Norway, it's vast, it's enormous. The feeling of space is overwhelming, and you just keep going and going and going and going and going. So there's like this shore forward motion, and yet things aren't changing in your perception, but they're slowly changing, and the shifts are huge, but you only realize that when you can look back, kind of thing. And that was what the experience of reading Hunger was like. And I think I've read a couple of other books, and they've been like that. And I have to admit that that's a reason for me to not really read a lot more Norwegian literature, just because sometimes I like things to happen.
Yeah, nothing happens in this, basically.
Yeah.
Just a lot of back and forth, really. Yeah, I did have that same feeling. Like I would read like 100 pages in a sitting.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then you'd be like, what happened?
Yeah, nothing happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. It was very intriguing. Okay, so we were going to talk about Cursed Bunny, but Kieran has had to go. And he was the one who was going to discuss Cursed Bunny, so we won't discuss Cursed Bunny. But that, I guess, was our wrap-up of the International Booker shortlist. What's your pick for the win? Have you got one?
Book of Jacob.
Book of Jacob, okay.
But the one I would recommend to people is Elena Knows.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Books of Jacob won. I actually wouldn't really be surprised if any of them won. Maybe Cursed Bunny, because I know that's a bit of a weird
That's a bit
one.
lame.
Oh, maybe Cursed Bunny and Heaven would probably be the ones that I would be the most surprised to see win, I think.
I would be surprised to see Elena Knows win. I think it's a really good book, but I don't feel like it's doing something particularly
As
interesting.
much. Yeah, if a new name won, I wouldn't mind. I mean, yeah, all of them really, I wouldn't really mind. But yeah, I think a new name would be.
I think it's
my
always
pick.
good when a new name wins.
That's funny.
It just
Is that a joke?
No, it's usually. I don't know.
What did you say?
I think it's kind of good when a new name wins. I always prefer that, even if it's not as deserved.
I thought you were making a joke about the name of the book. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I see. A new name would probably be my personal pick, but yeah, Books of Jacob wouldn't surprise me at all. Tomb of Sam wouldn't surprise me either. Yeah. I think Elena Knows is definitely the pick for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I think I share your... Although I really think it's excellent.
I think it's excellent. I'd recommend it to a lot of people.
Yeah. I probably share your feelings about it being a prize winner. But, who knows what they're looking for, really. So that was that. That was our wrap-up of the Booker International Shortlist 2022. Thank you so much to Kieran and Christine for coming on and discussing the books with me. Really enjoyed the episode. It was really fun to record with both of you guys. I really encourage you to check out Christine and Kieran. I will link both of their social medias in the show notes, as well as the previous episodes that I did with them on the podcast. They've both been in previous episodes a couple of times. Since we didn't get to hear some of Kieran's wonderful considered opinions about some of the shortlisted books, I will put a link in the show notes to some of his video reviews on YouTube of the other shortlisted books. Also, because this is Editing Sarah, I can reveal to you, if you didn't know already, that the winner was announced yesterday as this episode goes live, and the winner was Tomb of Sand by Geetanjali Shree. So congratulations to her and to the translator Daisy Rockwell. They will share the prize money, which is £50,000 if you didn't know. So big congratulations to them, and thank you so much for listening to the episode. Thank you for sticking with us. I know this was a bit of a haphazard, weird episode, and I do apologise for that. But nonetheless, if you enjoy the podcast and you would like to support us a little bit, then we do have a Patreon account. If you sign up to our Patreon, we have a couple of different tiers which offer you different things. The lowest tier gets you early access to the podcast. The second one gets you monthly bonus episodes, and in the third one, we give you personalised book recommendations and also send you books in the post. We also have a monthly newsletter, which you can sign up to if you would like to hear more from us throughout the month, and why wouldn't you, of course. All that information will be in the show notes, but most importantly, thank you so much for listening, thank you for your support, and we will catch you guys in a few weeks. Bye! Okay, hi listeners, Editing Sarah back again. Kieran unfortunately has to take off at this point to deal with a family emergency, so he didn't get to finish that thought. But he did leave me with a little voice note sharing with you sort of a summary of the rest of his thoughts about the shortlist, which I will play for you now. Thank you, Kieran. I have got in slight trouble from Kieran before for cutting things out that he said not to cut out, so I thought I'd better leave that in that time. But thank you so much for Kieran. But thank you so much, Kieran, for coming on. Anyway, it was super to chat to you. For the rest of the episode, it's just me and Christine, so we will talk through the remaining books on the shortlist, and we will start by discussing Books of Jacob.